Yeah, well, my name's Steve Foyster. My job role here is peer support worker in the Rest Hub, and I've been working for Norfolk and Waveney Mines since the 6th of July this year. I had been severely depressed for about 12 or 15 months, and I was going through some very difficult times, both at work and at home, and I felt a total sort of numbness, a blackness, a loss of hope, a loss of identity. Every day there was a nothingness about every day, and this eventually led into a compulsion to take my own life by jumping off the top of St Andrew's multi-storey car park. I was acutely and severely depressed for 2 years before the suicide attempt, which was in May 1986. I was receiving help at the time, but it wasn't very good help. It was private help, and I was in such a vulnerable situation I didn't realise at the time that maybe it wasn't quite as helpful as it should be. And then, ironically, after I had the suicide attempt, I was registering at a different practice, GP practice, and I found a GP that I went and saw, and he gave me 40 minutes of his time on the first appointment, which didn't go down too well with the other people as I walked out, because obviously you normally get about half that time, but he listened to me and he referred me on to some community psychiatric nurses at the time. And both those people from different age range, one was someone who was about to retire and another one was a student trained, they both listened to me. And that's what I found made the difference. I was being listened to for where I was at that time. And that made a huge difference to me. And I was given the confidence to actually apply for some other jobs. I did go back to the job that I had been working with a firm only for a couple of months before I attempted my own life, and they'd held the job open for 10 months, amazingly. And I went back there and I just couldn't do it. I was in so much physical pain at the time, I just couldn't do it. So we parted on amicable terms. But that still gave me the confidence to retrain. At the time, it wasn't computer, it was still on the old typewriters, just how long ago this was. So I did that, and then I applied for other jobs. The first one didn't work out, but then when I was sort of encouraged to get into full-time employment, that helped a lot. You know, I was giving meaning, and I was probably seen to be just Steve at that time, where I was. And that is an important thing, I think, to have an identity, which I'd lost along the way. Yeah. I lost my job. I was made redundant about a year ago, and I was looking for something that would give me some meaning, actually. I found the loss of my job quite difficult. And it did give me a high level of anxiety. So while I was receiving benefit at the time, I was looking around for jobs, specifically in mental health idea. And because I'd done some peer support tutoring with the Mental Health Trust locally, when this job came along, I remember thinking, well, this feels pretty ideal for me, really. So I think what I'll do is I'll apply for it and see if I get an interview. And if I don't get an interview, I'll say, well, hey-ho, I'll wait until my state retirement age or whatever. And it drew me because I thought I could use my experience and hopefully some of my skills to benefit other people, but also to benefit myself, because I'd been out of work. You know, I'd been working with people for 12 years in a job that I loved, and it was getting back to engage with people and giving me a purpose and meaning as well. I do find working in an environment in which people, when seeing clients, they might have suicidal tendencies. That can be quite challenging and triggering. But I've had some very good training along the way, and got a very supportive team here. So, you know, you can download with other staff team members. So, I think that coming back now to an area, or coming to an area in which I'm actually giving out in this way, it's the appropriate time for me to do it. Yeah. Well, this book, Cry to Be Heard, My Road to Recovery, when I was seeing community psychiatric nurse Jack at the clinic, he said, why don't you write things down? Why don't you keep a journal? Why don't you keep a diary? Well, I never had done that. and I haven't done since. But I thought, well, I'll just write out the previous year that happened to me. And I wrote it in 60 hours, constantly. I was just taking a snack to eat. Longhand on line paper, 100 sides. And I just left that there. Then I decided, because I was going on typewriting courses, that I'd type it out, and I showed it to a few close friends, including the GP that I was now seeing. And they thought it was a good story. Then someone said, well, maybe this ought to reach a wider audience. This is way back in 1987, so you can see it's been a long time coming. As one of my friends sort of said, well, yeah, about time, you know. So I then typed it out on a Word document a few years ago and passed it around to some more friends and said, whatever. And then about 3 years ago, I decided I'd send it to a couple of publishers, but they didn't really know how to fit it in. It's part of a journey of faith and part of a journey of mental health and suicidal tendencies and recovery. And at the place actually where I had worked before, a year ago, I went into the cafe last Christmas, and the person there said, well, why don't you ask Paul Dixon? You know him, he's a local publisher. And you've done events with him before, which I had, done a lot of events with him. We've known each other about 8 years. And so I emailed over the first 5 chapters to Paul, and he said, oh, Steve, yeah, I'll probably be interested. He said, but I've got a couple of other books on the stocks. I won't have a look till the end of January. This is just before Christmas. So on the 4th of January, I got an email back, said, can you send some more? So he was very interested, and he liked my style, and he liked the humour. There's still humour in it, you know, because I think that's one of the greatest things we have. And he said, can you just do a final part of 3 to cover from 1988 to 2020? Well, yeah, all right. I've never kept a journal, I've never kept a diary. But I acquired my medical notes. I paid for them in 2019. They aligned remarkably well with what I'd written from memory as well. So I was pleased about that. And we managed to meet our deadline of the 10th of September, which was World Suicide Prevention Day. So we've had 3 local launches. The last one tied in with World Mental Health Day. And I'm pleased with the result, and we've had lots of favourable comments. It's very accessible, easy to read in a way, although it deals with very deep issues. You know, you can read it easily. And we've sold 180 copies so far, which we're very pleased about. Well, in my role as peer support worker, I try to listen to people where they're at, and I bring my lived experience to maybe instill some meaning to where people are at. I major on hope quite a lot of the time with people, because the first part is all about hope, despair and hope. And I did a session this morning, and the person who came in was very, very non-eye contact and whatever, and very completely worthless whatever. And by the end of the session, quite gently, I think a little bit of hope came out. And, you know, I just feel I am quite amazed sometimes, really, that I've still got those skills to do that. I think it helped because from 2015-16 I was facilitating recovery courses, and I've also spoken to junior doctors, which I found was the most scary thing, but I did have a friend of mine who was an ex-district coroner by my side, and student nurses as well. And I've staged events in my previous role as a resource centre manager on very, you know, taboo subjects like suicide and whatever. So I think that the most reward I get, well, I think the fact that so many people have said, you know, on Facebook and whatever, this is a really positive thing. I'm so glad you've done this, because so many people either have been almost there or know someone who actually went there. Maybe it gives people some insight into what people were feeling, and maybe the way that people feel who survive someone in their family who's taken their lives. I mean, I don't know how my mother and father and brother would have felt had I been successful in that attempt. So I think the fact that although it was pretty scary when Paul Dixon pushed the print button, you know, so I'm just about to push it, you know, it's way out there. I think the feedback, I found it quite astonishing, really, in a way. But the one-to-one feedback I get now with clients here, I find immensely rewarding. You know, some people are somewhere where you might end a session and they haven't really taken anything on board, but that's where I was. But then sometimes there is a reaction, and I think most people who I've met here on Zoom or phone call or face-to-face have just said thanks for listening. And that's why the title, which was originally just going to be Cry, after a poem that I've got in the back of it, it was Cry to be heard, because to be listened to, that's all people want to start with sometimes. I think people's change sometime in demeanour, sometimes the fact that they said, well, it's really, really good to talk to someone. You get it, And I suppose that's because when you do try and take your own life, and then, if I've been involved in other career paths, social services was pretty rewarding in its way. But for this, I'm finding that, people are so receptive normally to what I'm giving out as well. You have to be very careful how much you give out, but it's, I think that was what I get to the end of the day, and I think like today when I go home, well, those sessions today were really rewarding, both for myself and for the client who comes in, and people say, well, thanks very much for that. And I say, well, it's a privilege. But it is a privilege, really, to hear people if they open up. It's a very welcoming team. People will give you great support. I was scared witless when I came in and I had to go through 4 different systems. Even the emails weren't quite the same as I'd used before. The technical side of me, really pushed. And there's always someone to help even after this period of time. If I can't get on a Zoom session, a colleague, team leader, whatever, recovery worker, peer support worker will help me out. It's a very open team, and people will listen to how you felt after a session and things like that. So this is the best team of people I've ever worked with. So,